Welcome. Welcome to Awakening Torah Mussar Mindfulness. I am Rabbi Chassia Uriel Steinbauer, the founder and director of the Institute for Holiness, Kehilat Mussar, where we practice Mussar Mindfulness and offer a track of mindfulness and just Mussar, all three tracks, to allow us to be on this path towards holiness. I'm so grateful that you've joined today on Sunday, January 15th, 2003. Today is Kaf Bet of Tevet, the Hebrew month of Tevet. And we meet regularly every Sunday, B'ezrat Hashem, God willing, at 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. So this is where we cover the weekly Torah portion of the Hebrew Bible from the lens of Mussar mindfulness. And of course, last Shabbat, just yesterday, the Jewish Sabbath, we delved into a new book of the Torah, the Sefer Shemot, and the name of the actual parsha, the first weekly Torah portion, is also Shemot. So we will jump into that after we cover our kavanah and dates. So this is now our 13th sitting together. We covered 12 during the first 12 weekly Torah portions of Bereshit, of Genesis. And I'm just delighted. It's just an honor and a privilege to be here with you, to jump in together to practice this. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen as I usually do, welcoming everyone here on Zoom, live streaming on our YouTube channel, on Facebook, and other mediums where this shows up. So thank you. Let's begin. We begin with the same kavanot, the same intentions every week. And if you are watching on video, you will see these intentions for today's practice before you. If you are listening on audio, on podcast, then you will hear me read them. So we see this act together of doing this awakening now for the next 45 minutes as an act of radical self-care for the benefit of others. So we say, this is something I'm doing to strengthen my own soul in order to be a benefit to others in the future. And then we say our second kavanah, our second intention, is that before doing acts for others, we say, this is something I'm doing to strengthen my relationship to others so I can be a better conduit of God's good when they need me. Because we really see that in doing this radical self-care, we are then able to care for others in a more wholesome way, with wise discernments, with better choices. And then we say that we're also doing this to strengthen our relationship with the divine. And this is something I'm doing to strengthen my relationship with the Creator, the one, the being of all. We're all one, so that I can be a better conduit of God's good to others when they need me. So may we all right now, in taking this practice on together, fulfill this. May we merit being able to bring this to the world, to the potential of the path, and bring more righteousness and more good to all who join us today and every Sunday. So, as I said, we are jumping into Shemot, which was covered yesterday in synagogues across the world in Minyanim. Tradition is that we study that portion the week leading up to the Torah reading. And then we go ahead and we have this privilege to jump in on Sunday together here on Yom Rishon to really take everything that we've learned from others and listening to the Torah reading, and then apply this lens, as I said, of Mussar mindfulness. So we are jumping into Shemot, which happened on Kaf Aleph of Tevet, Tafshin Pei Gimel of the Hebrew year. And it was the 14th of January, 2023, when we actually read this Torah portion this year. So I'm going to give a brief summary, and then we're going to jump in together, because we always have to focus on somewhere to contain our learning, because as you know, there's always so much we could cover together. And, in some ways, that is the path that we may we all merit having a lifetime to go through this cycle together, to always see something new and learn something new from it. Okay, so what happens in Shemot? Too much. So first, as you know, we had Yosef and his whole family come down to Mitzrayim, to Egypt, from the land of Canaan, the future land of Israel. And everyone comes down during the famine in order to survive it. They grow and grow and grow in the land of Goshen. They end up growing in numbers and growing in some ways as of influence, at least in the sense that they appear more and more as a threat that becomes a serious threat here in Shemot. Okay, so what does that mean? So Yosef and his brothers die in this Torah portion, and their children's families grow very large. They not only grow very large, they grow what it seems to be atzum, is like huge and powerful, and they spread out, okay? Spread out in the land of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. And a new pharaoh rises to power. And over this parsha, slowly over time, begins to move Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, from indentured servants, essentially, or kind of forced labor, almost like big communal projects they're forced to begin to work on first, to finally enslavement. Okay, and then, and I'll use Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, and Israelites interchangeably, our ancestors. So Paro then instructs, okay, that forced labor, that in like kind of required, in some ways it's like slave labor, where you require people to work and they're not paid or anything in exchange for it. That's how it starts off. And then when that actually doesn't stop, it doesn't have the effect that Paro wanted, which was, you're not really sure what effect did he want, right? In the sense that if the threat is that they're large and they're powerful and they're expanding, then you would think that you would want them to become smaller, less powerful, and be, assigned to one area, essentially. And apparently that policy of causing them into forced labor and finally slavery, was not effective. And why? Because they still continue to reproduce, to grow, to expand, to move out. So Paro then moves to the next awful level, which is infanticide, genocide, essentially, executive order to commit murder on a grand scale of killing all the male offspring of Bnei Israel. He tells this to two midwives, Shifra and Pu'ah. You always know their names. And they are commanded to kill the Israelite baby boys. They disobey Paro. They fear God, and that's the language used. They fear God. And we talked about this last year, but for those of you who haven't joined us from the previous year, the idea in ancient Near East, in particular Israelite culture and tradition, and in the Torah and the Hebrew Bible, to fear God means that you see God as the sole moral authority, and it's like it tells you between right and wrong. It's like an inner moral compass. And so when one says, I fear God, it means I don't commit wrong. And this to them, to murder baby boys, is a terrible wrong. And they fear God more than they fear Paro, because Paro has the ability through executive order to execute, to murder these two midwives, or if they're representative of houses, like two houses of almost like what's the term I'm looking for? Like not a yield. There's another word. when it's like a house of laborers who all train in the same profession. There's a certain term, and I'm missing it in English. Like when there's someone trained to work with metal, then everyone will be trained in that kind of house, all of metal workers. So this is the same thing here with the midwives. We think they might have been two large houses that worked with this. So they disobey Paro. God rewards them by building up their houses, which is seen as like the greatest thing back in the ancient Near East with our ancestors. To build up someone's house, that means to make it secure and lots of children. And so that's that. And Paro actually then, I'm not going to focus on the midwives this year. I focused on them last year, but he, in his like dissatisfaction and anger that they haven't fulfilled his executive order through this first recorded act of civil disobedience, he goes ahead and decrees that all Israelite baby boys must be thrown into the river, thereby including the whole Egyptian population in this executive order of genocide, of infanticide. So then, through this order, you have an Israelite woman, beloved Yocheved, the Ima, the mother of Moshe Rabbeinu, this baby boy named Moses. She births him and she tries to hide him because she knows of the decree that he's to be thrown into the river. His sister Miriam stands by to make sure that he's safe. She hides him in a basket and a teva, puts him on the river, hoping that he will be somehow saved, that mercy will find him. And so Paro's daughter, known as Bat Paro, which means daughter of Pharaoh, finds him and decides to adopt him, names him Moshe, gives him to Yocheved to nurse him. And we know from ancient Near East culture that often children were not fully adopted until they had weaned, which children back then weaned at a much later age than they traditionally do in our Western societies today. So Moshe, for his first many years, I don't know, we could guess how long. Some people, I'm sure there's a range, but generally children weaned back then probably more around 5 or 6, but we have no idea, right? Excuse me. So he's with this Hebrew family, his birth family, until he's ready of age for education and adoption. Essentially, he's going to make it because there was just so much death of babies, of children. So years later, Moshe is formally adopted by Bat Paro, grows up into the palace, and he sees an Egyptian beating an Israelite. We're not given any other context. We don't know if this is a beating because the Israelite was not doing the work that the Israelite was supposed to doing, like kind of like slave beating. We just know an Egyptian was beating, and the language is makah, to hit, was beating an Israelite. And again, we don't know if he was beating him to kill him, like a type of makah to actually try to execute, to kill. But Moshe looks either way and murders the Egyptian. And when he realizes that it's known what he did through other Israelites who happened to witness what he had done, he flees to Midian. Years later, he marries, in Midian, he marries Zipporah. That's where he meets his wife through Yitro, who will become his father-in-law. Moshe becomes a shepherd, essentially. One day he ends up encountering God, Hashem, through a burning bush that's not consumed. And God speaks to Moshe through the flames and tells him to go to Paro, essentially, and demand that Paro free Bnei Israel. So just to conclude our summary before we delve in, Moshe tries to actually turn down this job, if you see it as a job. Hashem shows up in the flames and says, you have to go to Paro. And he's like, no. 5 different arguments come up of why. And if we have time, we'll tap into them. He says, no. God shows him miracles. God tells him he'll be with him. God actually gets angry, meaning impatient. There's no savlanut in the sense of slow to anger, right? That is so valued that we learn from Hashem, right? So, maybe you'll say that God's slow to anger, that it takes him until the 5th no to finally get angry. So God shows him all this to convince him. And it's not until Aharon comes that it's finally brought for that familial connection that Moshe agrees to do the job. So keep that in mind. It wasn't miracles. It wasn't even God saying, I will be with you. It wasn't all the things that God shared. It even wasn't God's anger or impatience. It was when Aharon shows up to his brother, his older brother, to accompany him and strengthen him, to carry him, that he goes on to do this job. So on their way to Mitzrayim, Sipporah gives her son the Brit Milah, the circumcision that is well known among the Jewish people, the covenant between God and our people to circumcise baby boys on the 8th day. She goes ahead and does it, presumably because Moshe hasn't when they're traveling to Mitzrayim. And finally, Moshe and Aharon meet Paro. They demand to leave for 3 days worship, and Paro refuses, of course, to let the Israelites go and actually makes their labor harder, more difficult. Okay, that's a huge summary, but obviously you see Shemot covers from after Yosef's death to all the way to Moshe having his first encounter with Paro. There's so much, obviously, in between, right? So much that we could discuss. But what are we going to discuss? We are going to focus for our Mussar mindfulness practice on essentially like what is Moshe's key midah, key soul traits. So in Mussar practice, we look at what you might call personality traits. We call them soul traits. In Hebrew, they're midot, which means measurements of all the personality traits that make up all of the human being, essentially. And we look at how balanced they are, essentially, especially for each individual person. We all have our own kind of marker where we need to be, what's healthy, that allows us to do God's work in the world. So for Moshe Rabbeinu, I really believe that one of his key midot, and what I mean by that is one of his strengths and weaknesses. Okay, but why I'm even bringing this up is that there's something really key in Mussar practice called a bachira point, a choice point, where meaning because something is so alive and strong in you, meaning there's a dilemma that you could go either way. And so for Moshe Rabbeinu, his midah of ometz lev, which translates as essentially a really kind of a strengthening of heart, really gets translated in modern Hebrew and even in Mussar practice as courage, moral courage might even be the best translation, this ometz lev, which goes nicely with fear of God, right? This kind of strong inner moral compass. So for Moshe Rabbeinu, this is his midah, where he can clearly go either way. And what I mean by that is when he's very strong and balanced, right? In ometz lev and courage, right? In this moral courage, he's quite balanced, meaning he's in alignment with his moral compass. He knows right from wrong, and he has the compassion for others, the rachamim, and he acts on it. So the classic examples that we think of is, for instance, when he ends up at the well, where he ends up meeting Sipporah, his wife, and their sisters, who are being harassed by other ro'im, shepherds. He interferes and says, "Stop harassing them," and stands up, takes a stand for when people who are more vulnerable are being treated improperly and unfairly, essentially. And so he stood up for that. There's lots of stories of Moshe Rabbeinu where he interferes, speaks up on behalf of others, even in Midrash, where he goes after a lamb that got away, sees it drinking and has compassion on it, has mercy in a sense. So where's the difficulty? Where can he, like any midah that might be strong and balanced, for this one to be strong and balanced, you have to care for the other and you have to act on it, right? You have to be in alignment with what this is, like moral courage, right? And so for it to be unbalanced, you have to take it to an extreme, meaning it's really not so much, it might be courage, but is it really moral? And is it in alignment with the sphere of God, the strong moral compass? It's often reactionary and often from selfish motivation, right? Maybe even arrogance, something else. So it can go to this extreme. And the other extreme is where the person essentially shuts down. There's no moral courage. Even if they're aware of what's right and wrong, they don't have the courage to act out. So there's usually fear there. There's a stuckness. And, in the whole concept of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, it's a type of kind of freezing, right? Or flight. And, over here is the fighting. And so for Moshe Rabbeinu, we see him go to both extremes. He's like dancing all around on this continuum. And why is this so important as a model for us in our practice of Mussar mindfulness? Is because most of us, if not all of us, at some point in our path, in this practice, the potential of it, will recognize that we too, on certain midot, will be all over the continuum. Sometimes we'll be very strong and balanced, and then we'll be over here in this situation with this person, and then over here in this situation with this person or set of circumstances. And so let's delve in with him, okay? It's important for us to look at our examples here. So there's a key moment where Moshe Rabbeinu decides to murder an Egyptian. And the language is very clear, but that doesn't mean we know exactly what's going on. Okay, what does it mean? It means that he goes out to see his brethren. That's what we're told. Okay, and this is a significant telling, right? He goes out. So first of all, you have to go out. You have to go out and see. You have to go out first. You have to be willing to go to the people in need, right? And then he sees, vayar, right? Sivlotam, and he goes around and he looks at their burden. So he sees. This is one of the key acts. And seeing here, it's even Rashi interprets, right? Is that he directs his eyes, Natan enav velibo, right? He gives his eyes and his heart. What does he do? Lihiot mi yatzar elechem. So he directs his eyes and heart to share their distress. This is the first step of Ometz Lev, is this tying to Rachamim, to compassion, right? So he goes out, and this is Moshe, right? This is him coming, and this is his midah, his archetype, right? Where he it said he intervenes in a clash between Jew, Israelite, and non-Jew, the Mitzri, the Egyptian. Then he does so between two Jews later, and then again between two non-Jews. Like he's known for this, right? This champion of this cause, right? Where he senses of justice and fair play are involved. But what is clear from the language is that we hear that an Egyptian is hitting Makkah, an Israelite. We don't know if it's in context of the work situation. We don't know if it's a type of hitting in order to lead to murder. And so it's murky. It's these murky waters where we always say, where does the lotus flower come from? This mud, right? And now Moshe's in the mud. What is the mud here? Is this like inescapable fact that Moshe Rabbeinu, who ends up being the lawgiver, right? He begins his career, if you want, right? He begins really stepping out to use his midot to bring God's good to others, right? By being involved in a killing. And these circumstances constantly preoccupy Parshanim, these commentators of ours from ancient to modern. Okay, so this is a real touchstone to real issue, right? What is this? What's going on here for us? So on the view of it, right? We know when you kill someone, you murder someone, it's not acceptable. It is not a moral act. It's not in alignment with what we would even say fear of God. At the same time, if he was intervening about someone about to murder someone else, then it is an upright moral act. And he's actually even obligated to intervene. So here we are. What's the act? How are we to know? How is Moshe to know? Where, what's the wise discernment? We do know it was done with intention, because it's not an act of passionate kill, right? He doesn't run out, see his brethren, see somebody beating his brethren, the Jew, the Israelite, and then like intervenes by hitting the Egyptian to stop it, and he ends up being killed. It's not that situation. No, he steps up to the situation and then looks. Now, what is the looking? Is the looking, can I get away with murder right now? I don't know. There's another reading, which is very strong in the Jewish tradition. This idea that, and it's stated in the masculine singular, this idea when there's no man, then step up and be a man. Meaning when there's no one responsible there, in a patriarchal society, which therefore would be a man who has the privilege and power to be in that social station to act in that way. Obviously, we have the midwives doing what they did in their own way. So he might be looking left to right to be like, where is somebody? Where is the moral authority? Where is the Egyptian supposed to be watching this Egyptian and stopping him from beating, killing slaves? Where is law and order? He's looking around for the, excuse me, I thought I muted you. He's looking around for the man, right? He's looking for a man to step up and to stop this violence, to stop this act, right? If we want to give him the benefit of the doubt here, this might be a very strong reading, because if we read it the other way, like, does merely striking a blow warrant killing? Like if the Egyptian was just hitting once, right? That obviously doesn't merit murder as a response. So I I think for all intents and purposes, for our own practice here, we are going to choose to read it that he actually was practicing, that he was really fully aware of his big Bechira point, right? That struggle inside, that I went out to see my brethren and I see somebody about to be killed, who's being beaten. And he looks for someone to intervene and to stop and to help. And it doesn't happen, right? And his response, which might argue is this reactivity, his response is to murder the Egyptian and then bury the Egyptian, hide what he had done, realizing that there was no one to protect the Israelite, the Jew, and to stop this Egyptian. So he took matters into his own hands, what we call a vigilante, right? In some sense. This is a huge, huge thing to sit with. Not that you and I are sitting here contemplating murder or even seeing someone who's a slave of our own brethren being beaten, and there's no moral code or authority or the rule of law where we live. It's a very different situation for Moshe Rabbeinu right now. So, and it must have been quite terrifying as a child raised in Paro's palace, assuming that Paro is the ultimate authority, if not a god in some sense, that he probably was raised assuming there would be a moral authority, that there would be somebody to stop this behavior of beating the Israelites, okay? So we're going to hold that there. And again, when I took that idea where there's no man tried to be one, it comes from Rav Hillel from Pirkei Avot, chapter 2, verse 5. Very famous statement. So, for us, just taking these little nuggets along the way before we move into practice, if we want to take a look at this midah of ometz lev and this moral courage in our own lives, where we need to tap into the compassion for our brethren, for those we see around us, to act when we see injustice, for those who are most vulnerable, who need care, right? And to look around, to assess with wise discernment, is there someone around that's better to do this job than me? If not, am I the one to do this? Is this the right path? Is this wholesome? Will this cause more harm and suffering, or will alleviate it, right? These questions that we have to ask along the path in our own practice. So I think that's what I want to share with you right now here. Let me touch upon a few other points with you that I want to say about this. Just tapping back into this continuum of ometz lev as a midah, as a soul trait, right? That in order to understand that the call to justice that we may all feel, right, especially in our Mussar mindfulness practice, can be reactionary, can be an adrenaline surge, can be an energy state of reactivity, of anger, right, of energy. And it's disconnected. It can run the gambit with arrogance, right, of taking up too much space, of us being full of judgment, right, and driven by like an impulsive boldness, essentially. So that's this over here, and that might have been going on for Moshe Rabbeinu. We can't know exactly. I just know that it does sit with us. There is something still whispering in our own inner moral compass that says, maybe Moshe Rabbeinu should have murdered the Egyptian. And even if he did, and say it was the right thing to do at the right time, and he was the right person, it still caused a life. And there's no one doing that. You have to live with that. had to live without harm and suffering. Obviously, harm and suffering was being caused, but we carry that. We carry the mud. We're steeped in it. We're walking in the mud to produce this lotus flower, right? And so it's not so much judgment as discernment, trying to learn from Moshe, learn from him in his circumstances and situation, right? So ideally that we have to soften that impulsive boldness of the Ometz Lev with energies and direction of the heart, this fear of God, this strong inner moral compass, so that we don't go as a crusader, right? And end up making it for our own glory, right? Then for the greater good, right? Bringing God's good to others. This boldness needs to be balanced with a devotion towards what is upright, towards God, towards, this courage born of love and devotion. It's a delicate dance, right? It's something that's very important to be on the path in community, taking refuge in the Vad, in this practice, what some also call the Sangha, to really support one another, to understand our behavior and where we're headed, and how to work on this. So, So I will say that I wish I had more time to delve into this to show you Moshe's other extreme, right? We'll get into it, God, this Rat Hashem, God willing, next year. But here we saw him, right, as this man who has this moral Ometz Lev, this moral courage, only to, move completely to the other extreme of stuckness, of frozenness, right? The flight. So strong when he finally encounters God in the burning bush that was not consumed, where he comes up with 5 reasons why he should not be the one to go and try to help free the people. It's a beautiful example to look at someone's behavior across the spectrum, where he's actually kind of caught up in delusion. If we look at greed, hatred, and delusion, right? He's caught up in delusion. His objections, if you want to take a look at it, it's in chapter 4, verses 10 through 13, some of it, where he moves from moral courage to cowardliness. There might still be a moral cowardliness, right? There's a moral avoidance, a moral fear. Like he's still balanced in the sense that he knows what's right and wrong. It's still in him, but he doesn't have that which to act on it. And he has such strong fears. He's in the trance of unworthiness. So there's the dukkha, right? As we say in the Dharma practice, where he's just stuck in this vulnerability. And as we all go through in life, right? But he's having that second arrow. I would even say the third arrow. The second arrow is the reactivity to this vulnerability, to this fear. And he's reacting by shutting down, not me. And the third arrow is that of, judgment towards the self. There's a lot of unworthiness there where he says, I'm not fit, I can't speak, like all the, I don't want to call them terutzim, excuses, but there's definitely the storytelling that you hear Moshe telling himself in his head, right? The thoughts where he has all his objections. He has too strong of too much humility, too much anava, where who am I? I'm not able to represent the people. I won't be believed. And God tries to provide all these reactions, right? Not often. It's not a wise conversation. It's not working out at first. God's like, I will be with you. I will give you my name. Here's my name. This is what I will be called. I will give you miracles to show. Moshe goes back to unworthiness. No, not me. And it's not till, as I said before, where the connection, where God finally says, look, your brother, your older brother, Aharon, is coming right now to be with you, to support you through this. This is kind of incredible, where you finally see Moshe coming out of the trance of unworthiness, out of the reactivity and arrows of dukkha. He's able to come out and serve, to bring God's good to others, right? In a balanced way. So let's hold on to all this, because we have much more that's going to come up in the book of Shemot together, where we're going to be able to delve in more to this Ometz Lev, and when we all get stuck in dukkha and our own vulnerability, and how that might lead us to reactivity, sometimes violent reactivity, and then also acting with proper balance, correct? Okay, let's move into our mindfulness meditation practice together now, in order to internalize some of this great gift together, essentially. So I invite you to assume one of the four postures that is most comfortable for you, where you can be upright and also at ease, right? So what does it mean to be at ease? It means where you're comfortable and open, you're not stiff, right? But you're also not sitting back slumped in the chair, okay? So upright, I invite you to come to the edge of your seat if you're in a seat, or on your zafu, your meditation cushion. And we're going to move into a guided meditation together. For those of you new to this practice, you can trust me by following my voice, and I will guide you of what we're going to do. So in your comfortable posture now, where you feel both awake and alert, go ahead and feel yourself grounded and supported by the earth. I invite you to close your eyes, lower your gaze. We start with a relaxing body scan as we move through the awareness of the body, and gently invite each area to soften if there's any tension. So we'll begin with our head and face and neck. Noticing if there's any tension, the forehead, the eyes, the jaw. Softening down through your neck, your shoulders and arms. Inviting ease, softening. Continue down through your torso, softening your chest and your belly. Allowing your breath to settle at its own natural pace. Down now through your pelvic region and your hips, continuing through your legs. Inviting ease, a softening to any tension. Your thighs, your knees, your lower legs. Down through your ankles, your feet, your toes, allowing the whole body to relax and be at ease. I invite you to bring a half smile. Notice how this might affect your thoughts and your state of relaxation. Take a few deeper breaths now. Inhalation, inviting ease. Exhalation, calm. Inviting further relaxation as you let go with each in-breath and each exhalation. Inviting ease. Letting calmness enter. Again, allowing the breath to enter its own natural rhythm. No need to control the breath or make anything happen. We're not here to become better breathers. Bring to mind now something that brings you joy. What brings you joy or a feeling of contentment, of well-being, knowing that you are on the right path. Perhaps being out in nature or the forest or by a lake. Maybe dancing or being with a loved one or a pet. Notice how your memory of well-being feels in the body, your mind, sensations in the body, emotions, thoughts that run through the mind. Just recall a time where you experienced well-being. Take a deep breath. Now bring to mind some blessing in your life. Something or someone you're grateful for or grateful to. As you think of this blessing, bring the image to mind. Allow a gentle inner bow, a simple thank you from your heart. Relax in the joyful feeling of gratitude as it begins to flow through your body. Take a deep breath and bring to mind another blessing. Something or someone you're grateful for. Allowing that silent inner bow, that thank you from your heart. What's most in alignment. Allowing ourselves to enter that open spaciousness, that we are alive. We're alive whether in the mud, producing that lotus. We're alive whether we're unbalanced in our midot and our soul traits, or if we're quite balanced. The life force, the gift from Hashem, from God, flows through us, sustains us, keeps us alive and going, even when we make mistakes, even when we're stuck in that second or third arrow of the dukkha, when we just are in reactivity and then judgments of that reactivity. And what a blessing is this practice, taking refuge together right now, to be able to become awake to our stuckness, to our reactivity, to know that we can be vulnerable with one another, to be able to practice there is always teshuvah, there's always a returning, a potential to try again. And as we are sustained in all the life around us, and colors and sounds and fragrances and tastes, We give that thank you, that inner bow to the miraculous around us at each moment, at each in-breath, and each exhalation, this out-breath, allowing that smile to emerge again. This is the consciousness, what our ancestors called fear of God. Is this light shining through this strong inner moral compass that allows us to receive the gifts of life flowing through us. To know that sometimes we will make mistakes and we will still have the Vad Sangha here to carry us. The teachings, the teachers here at the Institute. We can relax and support each other and honor the fact that we are alive, ready to serve. As we come towards the end of this meditation, before I ring the bells, you can begin to let yourself slowly open to your surroundings, taking it all in with appreciation and joy. Your eyes were closed. I invite you to slowly and gently open them right now. Give yourself an inner bow, bow to God, to your Sangha and your Vad, to your teacher, to this practice together of Mussar Mindfulness. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for showing up and being here together today to learn Torah Mussar Mindfulness. May we be deeply grateful to our ancestors for providing us this instruction, this Torah, to learn from Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, how we can come to try to balance Ometz Lev. So this week, I invite you in the practice of this moral courage. What do you need to go out to see among your brethren? Who's in need to stop the harm and suffering? And what is it that you can personally do and not do? What are you right for? What is the right time to attempt to practice that wise discernment and support, and to act with balance, not with the impulsive boldness and not with shutting down. There is a space for us to act. Thank you for today. I look forward to seeing you next week. B'ezrat Hashem, God willing.